Hello, everyone. My name is Jessie Fairbanks, and I am a features programmer for Doc NYC. I am very pleased to welcome the director, Michéle Stephenson, to talk about her film, Stateless. We are thrilled to be showing this film as part of our lineup this year. It is a nuanced and incredibly poignant portrait of the challenges that Haitian individuals, whether they are Haitian-born or Haitian descendants, face in living in the Dominican Republic. So please put your hands together on your couch and welcome Michéle. Hi, Michéle.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for making this film. I think, I don't think that many Americans are probably as aware as they will be after watching this film about the plight of the 200,000 people that became stateless as a result of legislation around 10 to 7 years ago, the ongoing colonial, the discrimination that started under colonial rule, which continues to tear apart communities today, and all of the challenges that the individuals face, which is really in so many ways brought to the forefront by Juan in the film. But first, I'd love to ask you about how you met Rosa Iris Alvarez and how you found out about her story.
Sure. Well, the film comes from a very personal place as well. I'm originally from the island, from Haiti. I was born there. My father's Haitian. My mother is Latinx from Panama. And so, and I grew up, hearing all kinds of stories, but also in relationship with the other side of the island, knowing both the positive collaborative elements, but also the deeply internalized sort of oppression that we all kind of face around the racial caste system that exists, and very personal too. So when the decision came down, and I had done some work in the past with short films around the earthquake in Haiti, and was very focused on looking at the positive side of Dominican Haitian collaboration after the earthquake. So I had met a number of young Dominicans and Haitians working in that space. And that, which happened a few years before the decision that came down and denationalized, the birthright citizenship of Dominicans of Haitian descent, that connection led me to an organization called Reconocido. And so when I landed in the Dominican Republic, 6 months after the Supreme Court decision, I had those connections with the organization, and the leader there introduced me to Rosa Iris. And I actually met her out in the sugarcane fields working on these cases that you see in the film. And she took me on one day, of the work that she was doing. And I just fell in love with her as a person, as an individual, extremely charismatic individual, but also kind of very committed. And also, it's deeply personal for her as well. And you couldn't ask for a better collaborator for a doc film. Not only was she committed to the stories that we wanted to tell, but she was also kind of co-conspirator with me in finding, people who could best kind of exemplify the stories that we were trying to tell. And she's the one who led us to Juan Teófilo, her cousin. He said, if we're going to do a story, we must cover, Juan Teófilo and collaborate with him. And so, yeah, it's been a partnership and a friendship till now. So, yeah, she's here in the United States, and we're friends.
Wonderful. I was going to ask for an update because the film ends with her, being granted asylum in the U.S. as a result of all of the death threats and the violence that her and her family face. And so I was curious about how she's doing. So she's here in the U.S. and her family as well?
She is based in Pittsburgh. She just recently received a scholarship at American University to do an LLM in humanitarian and human rights law. So she's been doing a remote degree, LLM degree, and hopes to kind of continue the work, here in the United States from the diasporic perspective on the plight, not just of Dominicans of Haitian descent and statelessness, but working on the defense of migrants, on a global scale here in the United States as well. So she is paving a way. It's not been easy, she's had to learn English. And, as any sort of exilee, life can be difficult, but she's had some tremendous opportunities open up for her as well.
Well, I'm sure that we're all very happy to hear that she's still fighting the good fight and that she's safe and well. She is, as you say, such a charismatic and wonderful individual and incredibly brave. So, we thank her for her candor and her openness in front of the camera and sharing her story with us, and also bringing along her cousin Juan, who exemplifies how much is sacrificed when you are basically exiled and stateless and have nowhere to go, which is a problem that unfortunately faces populations around the globe. Can you give us an update on how Juan is? How are his children?
Well, Juan Teofilo, well, his children are I think they're fine. He has an opportunity actually to see them a little bit more often. He's actually back in the Dominican Republic, but Juan has suffered 2 strokes in the last 6 months. And so that's been extremely difficult. And, he's really sort of relied on a network of support that, we've provided, others have provided in his circle to, to get the medicine that he needs and the attention that he needs. He is on the path of recovery, but it has not been easy. He was back in the DR and was able to get better medical attention than in Haiti, but the bills are extremely high, and also being able to get the medicine that he needs. But there is sort of a network of support, both financial and emotional, that he's currently receiving. I do believe he does see his children every once in a while.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm so sorry to hear that about him. His life is such an incredible journey, the fact that he lived in Germany and that he had his own business and that, he was a resident of the Dominican Republic until the change in
Yeah, I mean, he was more than a resident. He was a citizen. He was born and raised, in the DR with all of the legal papers that were required. And he was even in the military for a minute in the DR as well. So yeah, it's quite devastating.
It is, and it's Juan is such a interesting example of what is happening to individuals all around the world who have, lives, and their families have lived on land for generations, and in a night, your entire life can be upended, and who your identity is and what your citizenship says is actually not as much in our control, I think, as many of us would like to believe in
Absolutely.
our spheres of safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even here in the United States right now, the federal government has created a denationalization department looking at birthright citizenship, and they are chipping away at nationalized citizenship right now. The government is currently looking at people who have acquired citizenship through nationalization and threatening to take it away from certain people around incarceration and all of those things, which were never, ever to be touched. At one point, if you're a legal resident, there was a possibility, if you ever had encounters with the law. But now, even as a citizen, it is insecure. And who knows, depending on the elections, what might happen next in terms of our citizenship even being at stake. And there are cases at the border, too, of children of Mexican migrants born in the United States who are not given birth certificates. And I think it's important to look at the intersection of race and capitalism, because for me, statelessness is part of a continuum of how white supremacy and capitalism work, that it's not a coincidence that the darker skinned are the most vulnerable, that it comes from our history of colonialism and genocide and racism. So statelessness is definitely, in some ways, a modern form of genocide for certain communities, right? You don't need to kill people. Sometimes you just need to render them invisible, so they can't even, they're not even able to register for school without those papers. So yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our festival will be, the election will have happened, and
Yes.
as we're talking right now, we're not sure what that result will be, but I think that your comments are an incredibly important reminder, regardless of what has happened with the elections, that it's important to pay attention to what is happening, what your representatives are voting for, and how that affects issues that are important to you. As you mentioned, there's consistent encroachment on civil rights, and this is happening in democracies around the world. But there are a lot of parallels to be drawn from your film Stateless to other governments in other countries. So thank you for making such a beautiful film.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of this insidious thing. Like, in some ways, Black people are the canary in the coal mine, right? In terms of understanding how much is being chipped away at it. Before you know it, everybody's rights have been infringed on. So it's really important to be that barometer and see, if it's happening over there or happening with this community, there's no telling how far it can go and reach others who feel currently comfortable.
Absolutely. And, kind of what we were saying, that in an instant, your life can change. I would love to shift gears just a little bit. This is incredibly important subject matter, and we could have a very long conversation about this. But I do want to ask you a little bit about the structure of the film and your artistic vision, because it's so incredibly beautiful. We're dealing with very heavy subject matter, deeply personal stories that relate to Rosa and that relate to Juan and even Gladys, who we should talk about. First, I'd like to ask about this bedtime story about Morami, which is woven throughout the film, and it really creates a sense of tone, and it also provides a framework through which to experience the plight of the Haitians, and whether, again, they can be Dominican Republic citizens, residents, immigrants, but talk to us about this artistic decision.
Well, this is something that I was kind of, that I was wedded to from very early on, sort of trying to sort of push the envelope a little bit around structure and form, but also, and it's interesting because sometimes, as an artist, things happen sort of, I guess, in the unconscious and the conscious. There's kind of for me, this is one work, but there are also other works where I'm actually re-questioning history and trying to see how do I represent how history is still present for us today. And actually history is not history, it's today, And so this story of what I made, and then understanding the island and what magical realism means for the cultures and the communities in a way of processing pain and trauma that for me was very important to represent the story of 1937, the history of what happened in 1937. It was an intentional sort of genocidal act against darker skinned Dominicans and Haitian migrants at the time, where we still don't know how many people died, between 10 and 20,000, they say, and they're unmarked graves all along the border. I actually interviewed people who are now kind of in their 90s who either participated in some way or another or were actually hiding people in their homes, just like Moraime was searching for some kind of respite. And so through the research, I felt we needed to tell this story, and it's based on a book called The Massacres Walked by Foot, and Massacre se passe à pied, which there is this symbolic river that's called the Massacre River that separates Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And so there was this story in that book of this young girl whose experience is sort of highlighted in this legend that I ended up putting together and drafting. But it's really this young girl, there's a certain level of inspiration in terms of she's present to protect and to help, and she's also present and Rosa sort of rides on her shoulders, and so the idea that sort of Rosa is giving her due respect to, her ancestors and to Moraime and what Moraime represents. So it was a very intentional kind of desire and mission, because it's this idea for me that our stories, our history has still yet to be uncovered for all of us, and how we see ourselves. And so that figuring out how to make that 1937 kind of experience present today was very important, and sort of also exploring the artistic aspect of it too, I felt was a lot of, well, for lack of better, fun, but also challenging. And that's what I was hoping to do, yeah.
I mean, it's beautifully done. You weave it in so organically and in a very different type of visual and structural presentation compared to the rest of the film. But I think that Morami is so important because it provides the audience an opportunity to breathe and to just kind of digest all of the information that is being presented. But also, as you say, it's an opportunity of hope because she is a beacon to children and as you say, this legend of a sense of protection. So thank you for including it. It was beautifully done, and it helped me learn more about the Haitian culture, and I really appreciate it. We're running out of time, but I do have one question for you. In addition to having Juan and and then having Rosa with us, who can provide kind of on the ground experiences to this issue of statelessness. And you also have a representative from the Dominican nationalist movement, which is Gladys, and we see her with her compatriots, and we see her visit cane sugar villages. And despite the some I wouldn't say that her position really changes throughout the film, but I'm curious if she has seen the film and what her thoughts are on the final.
Oh, Gladys has not seen the film yet. No, she has not. I felt that it was very important to put her voice in there, and we were very intentional in how we cast it, because I did interview other people who had the same beliefs but were much more aggressive in their communication. And I felt that Gladys's voice was very important because there was a certain banality, but also an aspect of that I think is certainly transferable here to the United States. Is she could be my neighbor, she could be my aunt, she could be, anyone that I know who is maybe closer than I suspect, and that the hatred that spews from her comes from a deep-seated belief that in some cases we cannot change those minds, but understanding that that presence is everywhere, and that this is the type of person, this is the movement that people like Rosa Iris and the work that they're doing are up against, right? And so I felt it was a duty for me, especially given sort of my diasporic lens, the fact that I'm a lighter skinned Black woman who may be able to have access to certain places that and certain conversations that are not as easily accessed, that her voice was important. She's not yet seen the film. We are in the midst now of planning what a screening will look like in the next 6 to 8 months with Reconocido. And I've kind of sort of cut ties with Gladys after, I think yes, it was a very interesting relationship and conversations that we had. And it's very enlightening for me thinking about what the belief system of sort of fascist, white supremacist sort of thought processes. And there is a belief system there that is immovable, that is really immovable, I feel, and that we need to come to terms with. And that, in some cases, they don't want to hear anything, like you can see it in the film. And I certainly, I didn't have to ask many questions. I would ask one question and she was ready to kind of really, tell it all to me from her perspective. And the need for her to get her story out was very deeply felt.
Mm. Well, I do appreciate your desire and intrepid fortitude to include a diversity of voices. It certainly allows the film to have a much broader scale. If people are interested in sharing more about Stateless with friends and family, how can we follow what's next for you in the film?
Well, you can follow us on our social media, which is at radastudio.org is the website. And we have our Rada Studio and Stateless Twitter handle, which is Stateless Apatrida. And we also have a Facebook page, which is Stateless at Facebook. So please stay tuned to that. We have a number of things happening. We'll be broadcasting on POV in 2021, in June of 2021. So stay tuned for that as well. And we're planning on a sort of robust community engagement campaign, both here in the diaspora with very strong Dominican and Haitian collaborative organizations, which we hope they'll be coming to Doc NYC to see, the screenings on Stateless. I know this is after the screening, but we're going to make sure to have a large contingent of our partners in New York watching it, because we know there is a very large Haitian and Dominican population in New York City. And there's also a lot of conversation happening about solidarity between those communities from this perspective.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michéle Stephenson. I know the film was supposed to be at Tribeca earlier this year, so we are delighted that we are able to host your film and to present it to New York audiences here at Doc NYC. Michéle has directed 9 other films. Please check them out and make sure that you tell everyone about Stateless. Thank you so much, Michéle Stephenson, and best of luck with the film.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thanks.